I'm Larry Stockard, and I've been with Tulsa Spotlighters since 1985. This building was designed by Bruce Goff, and it was built for the original owner, who was a classical piano teacher who was trained in Europe, Patty Adams Schreiner. And he built this for her. And he was only about 22 or 23 years old when he designed this building. He was an absolute prodigy. And but anyway, he designed this, and she wanted a building, a home, a residence, and a studio where the building would reflect her occupation. She was a classical piano teacher, and so you may have noticed these black tiles on the outside of the building and the placement of the windows, and they're reminiscent of musical scales and notes on the scale, the placement, and let's see. Well, that was 1928 is when she moved in here. Or the first 1929. It was built in 1928. The building, well, very sadly, her business went belly up with the Great Depression. So she was only here about 9 months before the Depression hit, and of course that robbed her of her career, and she eventually lost her home. I think she had to leave that went into bankruptcy in about 1933. So she lost this lovely home, which had a total of 8 studios in it. We're now men's room men's room and ladies' rooms are around. Those were originally practice rooms for little spinet pianos, and then the residence is really on 3 levels. Part of it, we've got a basement here. I'll take you through the cave down here in a minute. The auditorium was the recital hall, and on the one side was the living room, and there was the living room, and then they had the garage, and then in the middle of this business was the auditorium, which was the recital hall for the piano students. And they could open both doors of the piano studio on each side, and people could come in. Remember, there was no air conditioning in 1928, so but there was a lot of air and a lot of cool air off the river here on this beautiful location on the Arkansas River. And so that's where they did their piano recitals in there, and then they could go outside and have crumpets and tea and whatever, after the recital. Well, after she lost this building in 1933, this is a pretty specialized building. This is almost like a church. It's designed for a specific purpose. So it sat empty mostly for the next probably 10 or 11 years. And it was used, the only time that it was used was during between 1933 and maybe 1937 or 38, when it was leased by Holland Hall, which was they were building another campus, and so they leased this space in here. They only had probably 80 people in the school at that time. So they leased the space for conducting classes. And but other than that, it was unused until really about 1941, when Mr. Richard Mansfield Dickinson, who was a professional actor and one of the founders actually of Theater Tulsa, one of the charter members of Theater Tulsa, bought this house. And I don't know how much he gave for it, but it was probably just a kiss and a promise. But he loved this building, and of course he was an artist, and he loved this, of course, magnificent window here in front. And then he bought it, and he had to not live here for a little while because it had to have quite a bit of work now. I mean, having been vacant for that many years. And then he lived here, and he taught speech and elocution at local colleges here in town. And then in 1952, there were a bunch of underutilized actors from Theater Tulsa that wanted to have a club to help support the arts and the theatrical community in Tulsa. And so they formed the Tulsa Spotlight Club, I'm sorry. That's what it was called, Tulsa Spotlight Club. And there were 4 members of that, and Mr. Dickinson was one of them, and Carl Jansen, the original Joe Morgan, was one, and they had Virginia Thompson and a guy named Dick Cook. These were all the original 4 Spotlighters. Well, the club grew, and they were looking for ways to raise money, and they would meet here at this location because great, facility. So in 1953, they put on The Drunkard, which is an old-fashioned melodrama adapted from 10 Nights in a Barroom from like 1854. And but they started putting it on. Of course, they figured they'd do like 2 or 3 performances. That'd be it. They'd raise the money for the scholarships they wanted to raise money for, and that would be it. But every time they put it on, they'd sell out. So they thought, well, shoot, let's do it some more. And so they did, and pretty soon, well, a few more years passed, and you know, in about 10 years, Mr. Dickinson's health was beginning to fail, and so the Spotlighters had been doing the play for about almost 10 years then, and they formed a not-for-profit organization, reorganized the Tulsa Spotlighters, Inc., and continued doing the Drunkard. But Mr. Dickinson sold the theater for about half of what it would have been worth in 1962, 64, 62, 1962. And he turned down offers for about $70,000 for this property, and he sold it to Tulsa Spotlighters for $40,000 because he knew that they created an income stream that would help support this theater and keep this building in place. Because in the early 60s, if he had let this thing go to an outside buyer that had no love for the building, it would have been gone in a heartbeat. Because this building was too unique, and it was a treasured art property. And so important is it's one of the earliest surviving works by Bruce Goff, and it is really his first serious attempt at what they call the international style of architecture. In fact, on that one plaque up there, I think it's this one, this little thing up here. I can't read it without my glasses on, but that does tell you what the style of the architecture is certified as having been that for the you know, National Registry of Historic Places. And that picture that I showed you, okay, you got that right there. Well, we're going to go in here, and we're already set up in here for tonight, so just come on up. And that picture that I showed you was actually taken from about right over here, and when we repurposed this building for theatrical productions, we had to close off some areas that were open because of the light. I mean, it was a lot lighter in here then. There were windows up here above, and there were windows on each side, and then up above where this, above where that curtains are there, that was not, you can see that it's been filled in up there, that was all open.
Okay.
Okay. This is all that's left. These are reproductions of Olenka Erdy's. We have 7 of the 8 murals that she did for the Spotlight. It was 9 murals, I'm sorry, that she did under commission from Bruce Goff. And these were all to represent the various aspects of musical expression. And they had choral music, and they had percussive instruments and jazz and everything else. And in fact, in one of these paintings over there, these are not the actual ones, these are just small reproductions, because the originals have been, that's one of the great mysteries of the Spotlight. We don't ever know what happened to them. But they disappeared sometime between when the thing was, you know, went into bankruptcy, and Patty Schreiner lost the place. And then sometime between there and the time that maybe Holland Hall started having classes here. So, but we have had these reproductions made. One of the murals over there actually has the word jazz concealed in the graphics on there. You can't see it very well in this reproduction, but it was kind of a final dig that Olenka Erdy had against the owner, Patty Adams Schreiner, because she was a classical music person. She hated jazz. In fact, they didn't even have a radio in here in 1930 in the census, because she hated jazz, and of course that was the beginning of the Jazz Age. But Olenka concealed the word jazz in some of the graphics in one of these things. Under monitor, you know, a little knife in the ribs there with a good chance. This was an old plaque that Richard Mansfield Dickinson School of Speech, you know, BR 549. But that was when he bought the thing, and like I said, he lived here until the late 60s, I guess, early mid 60s, I guess, when he had to retire. Old piano. Okay, this back here, that's the men's dressing room that goes in there, but originally this was the dining room and kitchen and pantry, and there was a door that went outside there. Of course, we closed off this, you know, for stage purposes. And you know, architecturally, this is probably a perfect repurposing. Of course, that's a word that wasn't around in 1928 or even 1940 or 50, I don't think. But this is one that's one of the architectural words right now, especially for among preservationists is to repurpose something. And I think, well, okay, you'd find a better use for it's what you've done. But they took here, this was all for recital hall, and up here we had room for 2 grand pianos originally. But we closed this thing off and made this into a theater. And it's survived mostly on its own for all these years. I mean, up until the last probably 10 or 15 years, we didn't take money from anybody for anything. And prided ourselves actually, being self-sufficient. Because most theaters aren't, as you well know. Anyway, this is, we can walk back there if you want to, but there's not much to see.
Okay.
But we've got some other things over here. And follow me, ladies. You'll notice all the history, you'll notice all the things on the walls, and people have signed their names. This is from children's productions and people that have been a part of the show for the last 60 years.
What's the oldest one we can
Boy,
find?
you got me. It's probably, I don't know. We entertain ourselves for hours when we look, because all the way around the theater over there on that other wall, there's names, see, like here too.
This is when I was born. That's my year here, 1973.
There's an 88.
That was before I got here.
Where do you see the 73? Yeah. The Yes Girl. Okay.
There
Yes,
must
girl,
be
I know who
older
that was.
ones, though, because
Okay, and
I'm
then of
not
course
that
he's
old.
up here, and where's my door here? Oh, there we go. Now then, what we're going, now this was, of course, this was the stage, and then this was the kitchen, the dining area, and the pantry were on the other side, which is now the men's dressing room. Over here, this was one of the main entrances, and this went out to the driveway out there. That's where you parked. And this room right here was originally the garage, a little one-deal garage, and the building on the room on the other side of it was the. Hey Wayne, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great.
The building on the other, or the room on the other side, was a servants' quarter. They had a Mexican man that lived here and helped keep the grounds and everything. But that's and this building, or this room right here, is the. This was originally the living room,
Okay.
and it's now our green room. This is where the actors stay, between scenes and everything. Above this was the master bedroom, which is big like this, and then there were 2 other bedrooms, one on there, and then there was one up even on the 3rd floor. But each one of these rooms, even above this one right here, had a walkout area where you could come out and sit outside in the summertime and look at the river and watch the traffic and visit with your neighbors and a nice picture
Yeah,
of the river.
that's pretty. To have your living area get to look out at that.
And this was what it would have been like in the early, or about 1928 or 29, to walk down Riverside, or just a dirt road then, but to see this McBurney mansion over here, which is the quintessential, European style traditional architecture, and to see this white cube style building that's sitting next to it. It had to have raised a lot of eyebrows, I think. But people still would stop and want to see tour this building. In fact, Mrs. Schreiner got really upset with Bruce Goff because he built this building in exactly the way she wanted it, but people would stop and come up and want to tour the building. They wouldn't sign up for classical piano lessons, but they wanted to look at the building. And so she got very jealous of it. She got very paranoid about that. But there were a lot of things which, that piece of marble back behind there was original. Of course, that's not the original gas stove that was there. And there was there was also an upstairs, there's another, this chimney continues up above. And there was a gas stove up there, in the same position.
Okay.
And also, what was it upstairs? Another one thing's kind of neat.
Now, did she marry and have children?
Well, Patty Schreiner, when she had this place built, she was like 40 to 42 years old.
Oh, okay.
And she had been divorced. And she had a niece and another young woman that were much younger than she was. They were probably in their 20s. And they were piano teachers. And so they had the 3 teachers living here, and then they had their gardener, or kind of servant. Did you notice out front it looks like a flower garden now? Well, that was originally, of course, a fountain that was designed by Alfonso Iannelli.
Okay.
And Iannelli is the same guy that did all the art, the gold statuary work on Boston Avenue Methodist Church, which Bruce Goff also designed. Actually, he did that a little bit before he did this. So he was just a kid, you know. You want to go down through the track?
Yes, that'd be great.
Well, let me give you a little background. This is a funny story because we've been doing this show here for about 10 years. And then and you might want to get a picture of this. That was donated to us by an architect from out in western Kansas whose wife collected that. That was an actual playbill from early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's 10 nights in a bar room, and a lot of the character names are exactly the same as they are in our show. But in about the early 60s, after we'd been doing this show for about 10 years, well, the women, we didn't have dressing rooms. They just put up a curtain in between. The men dressed on one side, the women put on their costumes on the other. And the guys were fine with that, you know. But women, go figure, you know, they kind of got the idea they wanted to have their own dressing room. So, and they didn't like the fact that if they wanted to go down and visit with the audience after the end of the show, they'd have to run around the building. There was no way to get other than going through the audience. You couldn't get down there. So, voila, this is what we did. This was dug by hand. Now watch your steps here. We've got a workshop back here. Workshop is back here, and we still use that as a workshop. And this was actually a shower, where and here is a shower for the gardener. He could do his work outside and shower off, and then come back up and of course go into his room. But this tunnel was dug by hand.
Wow.
Spotlighters dug this underneath the auditorium.
In what year?
In about 64.
64, okay.
Yeah. And,
there's more writing on the walls.
There's more writing on the walls. And I took a guy through here one day and said, "What's all this dirt doing down here?" Anyway,
it's real.
It's right. And so, anyway, we dug this tunnel by hand. And
were you a part of that digging?
No, not then. This is about a little over 20 years before I ever showed up.
Oh, okay.
But
how long did it take?
I think probably 6 months or so. I don't know. Jared was here. He was just a kid, but he might remember. But anyway, this is how you get from the stage, down here without running outside around the building.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Watch your head.
Who'd have known?
Who'd have thunk it, huh?
Mm-hmm. Here we are.
Now we're back here.
Again. And that they had chromium cups at various levels outside of this very stylistic man figure out there.
Okay.
And there were these chromium cups. We don't know how they were placed or how they were used, but the water that came out of the fountain came up and flowed down into these cups and then cascaded out of the cups into the water into the pool below. And supposedly emitted musical tones as it hit the water. I mean, it sounds good. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine. It would have been incredible, but we can't find anybody, and we've looked for years, probably better 6 or 8 years. I've tried to find anybody that might have an old photograph, because that the Kodaks had been invented, of course, at that time, and were affordable by most people. And you think that somebody passing up and down Riverside would have noticed it.
Somebody would have taken a picture.
It may not have been here long enough, because if you actually think about that, it was not a very well conceived idea to begin with, because right down here on the river with all these hardwoods, with all the maples, all the debris from the trees and everything, I kind of suspect that maybe the gardener himself might have sabotaged the fountain because he spent all his time down there, would be my guess. Red ceramic tiles that were used for construction, and then of course stucco was put on over it. Well, if you knew anything about where stucco works best, it works best in very arid climates. Of course, especially since the 50s, and we've gotten all these lakes, it's very humid, and if you get a crack in it, fills up with water, it expands, it cracks, and so it's not ideal material for construction in a climate such as this. Albuquerque, fine,
be great,
but it's a different story here. And of course, but nobody knew that this building was still going to be here, or that would take a new life on, in the 50s, and We did replacements and we did repairs to the best of our ability before, and I tell people, if we'd have known we were going to be so successful over the years, and still be doing the same show after 60 years, we'd have planned a little better. We'd have saved a little bit more money and not given so much of it away. But, as being a 501c3, we've given thousands upon thousands of dollars to scholarships, worthy causes, for Tulsa and Oklahoma and the area. It's countless dollars. When you figure that a ticket to see somebody at the BOK Center down here, you're paying, 50, 60, 80 bucks, $15 you can get in the Drunkard, and you got an Oleo, and you got local talent and everything. It's a pretty good bargain.
Right. Well, our architect for the renovation of the building is Herb Fritz of Fritz and Bailey here in Tulsa. They are restoration architects, and that's one of their claims to fame, is they have done numerous projects in the Tulsa area. The most recent, I think, probably is Will Rogers High School. He was the lead architect on the complete renovation of Will Rogers. That he was the fellow that got us on the historic registry. He was the architect who climbed in, under, around, through this building, every inch of it, along with a number of other people to get us on the historic registry. So
you're trying to raise
$3.5 to $4 million is what he tells us we're going to need, and it's got to be done in a very set program: the roof, the stucco, the windows, the doors, and then move in for the electrical and the plumbing, and then finally renovation of the interior.